Welcome into the Door Report. It is episode 176. It is September 5th, 2022. We are powered by Alaco Fine Wood Floors. They've been family owned and operated for more than 2 decades. Alaco Fine Wood Floors is Nashville and Middle Tennessee's choice for premium quality hardwood floors. Since 1995, Jimmy Alaco and his army of employees have embodied the approach of taking pride in one's craft and providing superior customer service, growing from a one-man shop to a team of 23 professionals who share the founder's passion for quality craftsmanship and customer satisfaction. You can call them at 615-356-0303 or log on to alacofinewoodfloors.com. Alaco Finewood Floors, serving Middle Tennessee's hardwood flooring needs since 1995. And Will, we've got a game to recap. We've got another win to recap. Vandy is 2-0 for the first time since 2018, and man, this season it's just good vibes. It's just good vibes, man. And obviously, the way it ended on Saturday night, especially that third, fourth quarter, left you with a little bit of a sour taste in Vanderbilt fans' mouth. But at the end of the day, they got to win. They got to win. Will 42-31 over the Elon Phoenix. It was a bad night to be a Phoenix. Great night to be a Commodore. We'll get to our three main takeaways from that game. We'll start that series, and we'll discuss Vanderbilt being an 8-point underdog against Wake Forest, Will, which was pretty shocking. But, Will, ugly game, but they got it done. A win is a win, and there shouldn't be any complaining.
A win is a win is a win is a win, Billy. We have seen too many moral victories. I do not care how the win happens. It does not matter how pretty it is, how ugly it is. It all looks the same in the win-loss column. And when we look back, I know that there are lessons to be taken away, and we'll get into those when we get into our key takeaways. But those lessons can be thought about the day after the victory as we build up to the Wake Forest game. But 2-0, Billy, after
Ooh.
what we started with last season. And then before that, with the 0-9 season, just take 1 second, step back. And there are a lot of positives to be taken away, but there are also a lot of learning points. And I think it's a lot better to be learning from an ugly loss that ended in a way like that than it would be if they had really let it get away like things have happened in the past with Vanderbilt
Yeah.
football. So it's always better to be learning when you come out on top. So, but they
Yeah.
did start out, Billy. This is one thing that we can get into right before we get in to the rest of this, but they started out fast. So it was the
Mm-hmm.
opposite. It was one of our key points going into this game was starting out quickly and getting up out to a lead early. They did that, which is not something that they've been able to do in the past, but they weren't able to close out, which is not an issue that we've seen. And how much of that was a hangover from Hawaii versus how much of that was Elon just kind of playing out of their minds. And we'll get to that when we go what I think you have broken down quarter by quarter here as
Yes, I
as
do.
we'll run
We're
through this game, Billy.
we're going quarter by quarter. We'll in-depth breakdown, wall-to-wall recap of Vanderbilt and Elon. Well, I'll say this before we get to anything. Last year's team does not win that game on Saturday. I'll say that, and I'll stick by that. Last year, the ETSU is better than Elon, but Elon is a good FCS program, and last year's team does not. I don't think they find a way to win that
Well, we
game.
speculated if Elon was going to be better than Hawaii. I think that was 100% answered watching that game on Saturday. That
100%.
Elon was definitely better than Hawaii, and Hawaii got their butt whooped by Western Kentucky,
Yeah.
who barely took care of Austin Peay the week before in week 0. So obviously, maybe a little bit of false hope in where this team had gotten, but clearly improved from what we saw on
Yeah,
Saturday.
and getting a win, that's all that matters at this point for this program. I mean, getting the win,
Mm-hmm.
that's the biggest thing. So we'll get into all of it. Before we get to the full recap, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at door_report and Instagram, door.report. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our podcast is available on Anchor, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. And while you're at it, give our podcast 5 stars and review on iTunes. Let's get to the Elon recap. All right, Will, let's start here with our we'll get to our three main takeaways, but we will we may even get to them as we go, but we'll get to those separately after this kind of quarter by quarter breakdown. But before we get to that, Will, pregame festivities were better than I thought. I mean, I was able to go to the Black and Gold tailgate. I was a guest of Jim Arnold, former Vanderbilt punter. And I mean, I got to talk to guys like Whit Taylor, Kerry Spear, Watson Brown. It was so cool to see former players like Andre Howe back on campus, Will Holden, so many guys that you kind of look over at and you say, hey, they're coming back to campus, and that's something that I think is important. And the top 100 that coincided with a lot of alums coming back on campus, and they were all honored at halftime. So I think that helped a lot, especially with leading into the game. The rain didn't help. It wasn't ever a downpour, but there was pregame some light rain, but it was a 30 about a 30-minute delay into that game. So really cool pregame festivities. Well, I know you were there about an hour before, but I thought before we get into anything, really really cool how they honored the top 100 in the 100th anniversary of Vanderbilt Stadium. By the way, the video they showed on the jumbotron, one of the best
Mm-hmm.
one of the best videos I've seen at Vanderbilt Stadium. I mean, the announcer was phenomenal. The footage they had, so that was great. Just to throw that out there. I mean, I thought that was awesome how they did that.
Yeah, once again, well, we'll have to go point by point. You hit on a few things I'd written down, but the first thing is the video content, which is what you ended on. You had that, and then you had the other pregame video, which I don't know if we previously talked about, but where they were, well, I guess the pregame hype video. I
Yeah, the
don't know which one
Parthenon.
it was, where they were by the
Yeah,
Parthenon, and then Broadway and all that.
it was
That
cool.
was awesome, and just that touching on everything associated with what social media has been doing as of late. The video
Hmm.
content, the pictures, everything is just a notch above. They're acting like an SEC social media department. They're consistently bringing out content, tagging players, interacting with fans and players more. So that's something that just early I want to hit
Yeah,
on. It's just overall the social media team has been 100 times better. But yeah, the pregame festivities. I mean, they were good. I think the rain definitely hurt the crowd size a little bit. The game was
yeah.
delayed. I think kickoff was delayed by 20 or 30 minutes. I was
Hmm.
there like 2 or 3 hours before pre-gaming a little bit, and there were quite a few people
Yeah,
out there. It's not going to turn around overnight. The crowd size and everything's not going to completely turn around overnight, but I really wish this Wake game, since we're talking about pregame festivities and crowd hype,
you
and I
wish it was at
posted on
night.
my Twitter the Kansas State. It's not even at night. I just wish it wasn't at 11 a.m. It's like this game could have a lot more hype built up around it if it didn't kick at 11 a.m. This could be a lot more similar to that Kansas State game that they had. What
Hmm.
was that, 2018?
I
It feels like a lot longer ago than
Yeah.
2018, but man, it was 2018
Yep. Yep.
because that was the year with Shermer and Vaughn and Pinkney
Yep.
and Lipscomb. And man, if it was at night, they would be able to build that up a little bit. It's going to be
Hmm.
11 a.m. It doesn't matter where the game is. It doesn't matter if it's in Knoxville or if it's in Gainesville, if it's in Tuscaloosa, if it's anywhere in the state of Texas, no matter the size of the fan base, it's going to feel a little weird kicking off at that
Yeah.
noon Eastern, 11
Yeah.
Central Time kick. Everybody's kind of getting there like
Yeah.
after the second, third drive. It feels like it takes the crowd just a little bit longer to get into their seats and for the game to really get into gear. And a lot of times that can favor a team like Vandy. So as much as I'm
Hmm.
going to complain about that through this, I guess, recap of Elon and going into the Wake Forest game with the timing of the Wake Forest game next week and what it's going to do to the pregame festivities.
Yeah.
Maybe
And,
it could
and
be a little bit of an advantage there, Billy.
potentially. But talking about improvements, Will, I did not get to go to any home games last year, but the beer cooler in the concessions was mind blowing. I mean, that blew my mind. I caught you right
That
before the
was
game, and
yeah, that
I
was
was like,
great
what
last
is?
year as well.
I was like, I did not see that coming, and that that's a treat for any road team. That I'm sure they look at that and go, whoa, didn't
That's a
expect that.
hidden
Didn't
gem.
Yeah,
That's like
didn't
literally
expect to see
that's
that at
one
Vanderbilt.
addition that all they had to do was that, and every person went from saying Vanderbilt Stadium sucks to like Vanderbilt Stadium's not too bad. It's just like the grab and go, like self scan, quick beer cooler and peanut thing that they
Yeah,
have right at the entrance of the stadium. That's an incredible thing that they have that I don't know if I've really seen anywhere else
I
with it.
don't
I'm
know
sure
that
somewhere
any other
else
place
has it
has
out
that.
there,
Yeah,
but
I don't
but
know
I
that
know
any
that
other
every
place
other
has it.
opposing fan base comments on it about how cool it is.
Yeah, and it was easy because it was Elon. I got in, got out. But
It's
also,
not
Will,
been bad
it's
even against
yeah,
Georgia last year.
even against an SEC team. I think it's just the whole presentation of the stadium and the concessions and everything in between is better. It's better. It's more improved. Speakers might need a little bit of improvement, but a little bit of tweaking. But
You're
I
always
think they've
on
been
about the
working.
speakers.
I think it can be better. I think that's the one thing in the stadium, the speakers can be better. But that's not the problem. Well, let's run through these quarters. And I don't know how long this could take. This could take a while. But I went back and watched the game and I took notes on each quarter. The first quarter has a lot, second quarter not much. Third and fourth quarter has a lot because that's when they struggled, and I think there's some improvement there to make. But I'm going to start with the first quarter, Will, and obviously, I think we will agree, we'll disagree on certain things, but I think the majority of Vanderbilt fans look at this game and they point to the obvious facts that were. So, Will, first off, I thought Matthew McKay played really well. I thought he played well. He ran the ball well. He made some really good throws under pressure. Elon had a great game plan. Credit to them. They came in and they were, they bounced back in the second half. First play of the game, Will, was a fade to Will Sheppard. I'm not sure why they keep trying those. It was a low percentage play last season, and they haven't seen success this season. And I'm not saying stop trying, but at the same time, the deep fade to Will Sheppard, they've got to find success on that. They've got to find a way to actually complete those because I think they were 0 for 3 against Elon on those. You start playing against bigger DBs, more athletic DBs, they're definitely not going to work. So that was kind of first there. Will Elon had some dudes on defense also. They had some players. I mean, they're FCS level, but that's a good FCS team. I thought defensively for Vanderbilt, especially in the first quarter, defensive line was active. Miles Cecil looked good all night. And so those are some of the early thoughts, Will. The deep fade to Will Sheppard. I know you agree with me on that. I know he tripped on the first one, that first deep fade. But I like the fact that they're attacking it. They're trying to go there. But it just hasn't seemed on chemistry. It hasn't felt like Mike Wright is on the same page or not as accurate on that deep throw. I think it can work, but that's where I'm at with that. So Miles Cecil, like I said, I thought looked good. The triple option pitch play, I think that has worked nearly every time. There's a triple option pitch play where they'll have two running backs in the backfield, and Mike Wright will fake it to one and then pitch it out. Ramon Davis had success with that all night. So that he had a 34-yard run. He had a couple of big chunk runs in that first half. Derrick is a guy in that first quarter specifically, all throughout the game, but first quarter he had his first career sack. And that guy, I didn't know how active he would be this year, but after these first two games, he's going to be active. He's going to have to be active. So really impressed with Derrick. Will, the whole game was a flag fest, I thought. The referees were not great, and I think that's part of what you're going to get when you got Vandy and Elon on a Saturday night. It was tough to watch at times, mostly in the second half. But yeah, we'll get to the refs there. Will, there's a certain play, the free play, Mike Wright to Jade McGowan. Great awareness by Mike Wright to keep his head downfield. McGowan had a step on his defender, but McGowan also really hit the accelerator when he caught it. And I saw him catch that, Will, and I said, let's see how fast this guy really is. He put on that extra burst and ran to the end zone. When's the last time Vanderbilt had a guy like McGowan that can just, you throw it to him and he beats the other defender down the field with his speed? And so I thought that showed growth on Mike Wright's part, Will, but also just the pure speed that McGowan has, and he deserves more touches.
Yeah, McGowan is going to be an absolute stud.
He's a player.
He's just got to get a little bigger. You don't want to get him hurt. He's a little small. He's built for a freshman, right. A young guy coming in, but you want to limit his touches, especially when you get into the bigger conference play and SEC play. Don't get him hurt early. But man, using him is like a honestly better Darius, in between Darius Sims and Tyreek Hill type player. Yeah. There's just so much utilization with them. Pair him with Will Sheppard as he continues to improve. But you started out hitting on that first play, that fade to Will Sheppard. And the weather may have caused some issues, but both of the times the ball for Mike Wright was pretty good. And Sheppard just slipped or he's got to make that play. And for whatever reason, it just hasn't worked out. I think it will. But what they're trying to do is not allow the defense just to play man coverage or bear 4-6. leaving in guys and just containing Mike Wright and guarding against this read option run play type stuff and quick passes. They have to have something downfield. And they were able to do that with McGowan beating man coverage on that offsides, like you said, recognized by Mike Wright. That is always one of the biggest things in quarterback growth and awareness is just seeing that offsides. That is one of the biggest advantages you can have in a single play is just a free shot down the field with no risk of turning the ball over and everything to gain. And so many times you'll see a quarterback just throw the ball away or not do anything with it or throw a short pass and you're just like, just fling it down the field. That's one of the best opportunities you have. And Mike Wright did recognize that. So that's a sign of growth from him and just being in control of the overall game. But they still don't have anything consistently that you say that is a consistent down the field target or play or option that they have. There's not anything. Obviously, Mike Wright's not going to be consistently throwing corner routes, fitting the ball in tight cover 2 windows to Will Shepherd, but you have to have something. And the tight ends weren't heavily utilized this game. They blocked well, but they weren't really utilized within the offensive game plan. But yeah, for whatever reason, the stats will show a lot more explosive plays than last year. I am just not sure how many of those explosive plays are really there through design or new design that's going to make the defense respect the big play, and how many of those are just a result of Vanderbilt actually having those better athletes in SEC speed in McGowan and Mike Wright.
Yeah, and Will, another explosive play that we saw, it was a quick screen to Jaden McGowan, and using him out of the backfield is going to be important this year because I know he's not a running back, but he had a play, I think it was at least 40-yard run off a screen out of the backfield. That's another play I think they can utilize and utilize it often. Will, and then defensively, Anthony Orji flying around, of course, got a little banged up. He's healthy,
that had me like holding my breath the entire time.
Clark Lee
almost
ran out
threw
there.
up in the stadium.
Yeah, Clark Lee ran out there, and you saw him with a big smile on his face as he's jogging back to the sideline. I could feel the relief on Coach Lee there as he's jogging back. Orji was flying around. I thought Derrick Wright played really well too. Well, he played really well in a couple different positions. We saw him at safety. We would see him come inside, and they do the same thing with Mahoney. Derrick Wright. Those two guys are really just Swiss Army knives. I mean, they're all over the place on defense. So, one play in particular, this was in the first quarter, the screen pass touchdown to Will Shepherd. I thought that was good by Mike Wright, getting it out quick, but it was close to a disaster. I don't know. It looked like the guy Gavin Schoenwald made a decent effort at getting the block, but Shepherd on the route, if you look closely, he didn't really make any jolt or anything. He didn't make any step. He just kind of stood, looked over, and caught it. So I don't know if that's an adjustment that needs to be made, but it looked like that was close to maybe being a tip or an interception potentially. But they did. That was a great job of Mike Wright getting it out quick. Wright 2 passing touchdowns in that first quarter. Will that was really it for me in the first quarter. I thought it was a really well played first quarter for Vanderbilt. They started the game off very hot, and they needed to. I mean, that's what we said. We both agreed on that, Will. A hot start needs to happen because we know why. We know we found out why in the fourth quarter, because without that fast start, who knows? Who knows what could have happened in that game, Will? So that's what I got in the first quarter. I don't know if you wanted to hit on anything else in that first quarter, but second quarter, Clark Lee said, I thought we fell asleep in the second quarter, and I agreed with him. On that one. And Will, second quarter, we saw some good punts from Hayball. I know we don't want to see Hayball out there, too often, but I said I wanted to see more of him, and boy, did I. We saw some good ones in that second quarter. And even when, even when he would feel pressure, pressure's coming, he would still be able to get it off in great spiral and get it and punt it down the field. So saw what I wanted to see from Hayball. Defense played really well. I thought the second quarter was their best quarter. Elon on third down, Will, was 0 for 7 in the first half. Vanderbilt's defense they were up for the task, but Will, the punt coverage, going back to Hayball, that still has to improve. Punt coverage is something I look at this game and say, boy, you can't waste Hayball's leg. I'm not saying they gave up a punt return touchdown, but it felt like they were giving up a 10-yard, 15-yard return almost every time. But they had some good stops. They were stopping, break a tackle, maybe a 5-yard gain on a punt. But punt coverage is something I look at, especially in that first quarter. And then you saw it a couple times in the second half, Will, where that's got to improve, especially if you punt it over to an athletic, very, very athletic punt returner in the SEC or even Wake Forest, you can look out. So, but yeah, other than that, Will, I thought the second quarter was good. Late second quarter was good. The middle 10 minutes, Clark Lee said, were really good. Middle of the game was good. They finished the second quarter well. They started the third quarter well. And then right before halftime, Will, Mike Wright's legs were huge. I mean, they were huge. The touchdown to Shepard on that skinny post route, that was too easy. I mean, that was a good job of Mike. Just they had three receivers on the left side, just dropped it out there. So first half was good, Will. I mean, 28-10, you felt comfortable. You felt comfortable at that point as a fan watching. But I don't know if you're with me on this. I still felt Elon had a lot more in them. I thought I knew they were going to come back. I knew they were, but it was, can Vanderbilt withhold that? Can they withstand the Elon run? So that's what I got in the first half. Well, I thought they couldn't have played better, maybe a little bit better in the second quarter, but that first half was as good of a first half as you might see this team play this season.
Yeah, the first 14 minutes of the game were 21-0 Vanderbilt until
Yeah,
that 75-yard pass from Elon. So it was pretty much a perfect 14 minutes to start the game. I mean, what you could dream up. You've hit a big play that you're showing that you can hit the explosive play, and it was actually a pass this time and not a run.
yeah,
You've worked on things. You've had 3 drives that worked pretty much how you wanted the defense coming out and creating stops until that 75-yard pass. And he said fell asleep a little bit. That's exactly what I think happened. I mean, it took the foot off the gas, might be a good phrase as well. But they came out and initially shocked Elon with their speed and athleticism, and I think that's something new for this team. Being on equal footing or better footing than the
right.
opponent, I don't think has been the case for them ever. And in the first 2 games this season, they've been the more talented and more athletic and stronger and faster team. And so that, I think, happened in the first quarter again. And in the second quarter, that was enough to continue that lead out. But yeah, I mean, the defense played pretty well outside of that one drive at the end to close it out. Thank God that happened to make it 28-10 and
Yeah.
make you feel a lot better going into the half. Otherwise, 21-10 would have felt like, man, Elon coming out in that second half, and Vanderbilt was able to at the beginning. I know I'm jumping a little bit ahead of maybe what you wanted to get here, but was able to put together a drive to start out the second half that really felt like it put the game away at that point, even though things did get a little hairy after that. But the adjustments at halftime, continue to look at that first drive. And granted, some of that may have been fatigue that carried over, but yeah, the second quarter just almost you could fast forward past it as far as looking at the game and
Right.
really evaluating what happened.
Yeah, you saw the design quarterback draw for Mike Wright. I mean, that was like a 40-yard touchdown run for Mike Wright there. I think I speak for Vanderbilt fans everywhere, Will, when I say Vanderbilt should do that more often. The design quarterback draw. I don't, and it's not always going to be open, and it, but Mike Wright. I'm not saying, he got lucky there, but there was a lot of space. There was a lot of space, and he just boom jolted into it, and he got the touchdown there. I thought overall, though, Will, in the second half, Elon outplayed Vanderbilt. They outplayed Vanderbilt in that second half. I know Vanderbilt got off to a good start in the second quarter. They scored on their first possession, but there was really nothing else after that in the third quarter offensively for Vanderbilt. Well, a big play in the third quarter, I thought. A little over 10 minutes to play. Matthew McKay throws a deep one down the right sideline to Jackson Parham. Tyson Russell is in coverage. It was a close call. I did think Parham came down with it, but I thought Coach Lee could have challenged it if he thought Tyson knocked it out. And I know you know what I'm talking about here, Will, but for Vanderbilt, that was a big play in that third quarter because right after that, Elon had the deep touchdown from McKay back to Parham, where you saw B.J. Anderson in coverage, and he was there to make the play, but they didn't make the play. So Russell on that one didn't make the play, and Anderson didn't make the play. By the way, Parham's a really good receiver. Jackson Parham's I mean, he's good, but at the same time, Vanderbilt's defensive, they were in position. I mean, they were in position to make those plays. So that's what I look at. Will those were circus catches. I mean, I don't think they're not going to make 2 better catches than that all season long. And Clark Lee talked about it. I mean, those catches, those were big time catches where Russell's in his face. Parham makes that one, and then he goes down the left sideline and makes it over BJ Anderson. So Will, I thought those two catches that's what really kickstarted Elon and their offense. And they said, hey, we can make plays over the top of this defense. We're going to keep trying to do it. And on the one that scored a touchdown over Anderson, Matt McKay had pressure coming right at his face from CJ Taylor. Taylor was right in his face. McKay sat in there and dropped it in. So, I mean, credit to Elon and on those two plays. I mean, those they're not going to make two better catches than that all season long. I'll say that. McKay, the quarterback, he really got into a rhythm, Will, in the second half. So that kind of early third quarter, those two plays. I mean, those two plays I thought really kick-started Elon. Going to Vanderbilt, though, Mike Wright missed Jade McGowan open for a first down at the 7-minute mark. That was a third down play. McGowan was open. He was open, and it would have been a first down, and he would have had room to run. Mike Wright just missed him. He just missed him. I know he had a little bit of pressure, but that's an adjustment, I think, for Mike. He was a little inconsistent in the second half. It's hard to say when the guy throws for 4 touchdowns and runs for 2. It's hard to complain about that performance, but Clark Lee said it after the game. I still think there's more out there for Mike Wright, and I agree with him. I think he did miss a couple throws. He also had the long throw down the sideline to Will Shepard. You saw that 3 times, Will. And again, I'm going to keep harping on this. They've got to find a way to hit on those because they want to. I mean, they want to do that. And I know you said, they will. And I think they will also. But yeah, and then you saw Vanderbilt start to wear down a little bit, Will. So that's kind of my third quarter analysis. And like I said, what a play by Parham over BJ Anderson to end the quarter. They were attacking BJ Anderson all second half, and Vanderbilt really didn't have an answer for it. I mean, Clark Lee talked about it after the game. He said he wanted to make an emphasis on that with his defensive staff, and he did. I'm sure he told that to Dan Jackson about rotations and getting guys in. So credit to Jackson Parham, though, Will, but I do think that's a little concerning on the defensive backs part that, there were plays out there to be made, but they didn't make them. So that's kind of what I've got for the third before we get into the final quarter, the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think you broke down the third pretty well. And I think most of the points are pretty much second half points that I have. So if you want to keep breaking down the rest of the fourth quarter, I don't really have the things that I want to say split off, and a lot of it being about the secondary and the 2 ways that maybe you can split off in your thinking, whether you're a glass half full or glass half empty type of person. If you're a Vanderbilt fan, I imagine which one of those you probably lean towards. So I'll give that after you finish up the rest of the game recap.
Let's finish off here, Will. Elon had all the momentum to begin the fourth quarter, but on the other side, Vanderbilt's offense completely stagnated. They completely stagnated in the fourth quarter. At the 11.5-minute mark, Will Owusu forced a fumble, and McAllister recovered it. That was the first turnover of the game for either team. That was on Parham, the good receiver for Elon. And then, Will, I think this was a huge play in the game for Vanderbilt to kind of take ownership and say, we're not letting this happen. At the 10-minute mark, Mike Wright gets outside the pocket, and he gets popped by Trayvon Jones. Coach Lee, not happy about it. Bradley Ashmore, not happy about it. He gets up in the face of Trayvon Jones, starts yelling at him. And, I mean, those guys, they're standing up for Mike Wright. They're standing up for him, and it felt like I saw a unity with this group that, we didn't see a ton of last season. I mean, you saw it towards down the stretch of the season, but there's a unity on this team. There's a chemistry on this team and a close-knit attitude with this team, and it starts with Coach Lee. And he went right over there to the ref and yelled at the ref and said, hey, look at that. Look at what just happened. So I know that was pretty early in the fourth quarter, but I thought that was a little bit of a tone setter for the team to say, hey, we're not sitting back here and surrendering to Elon. We're not going to sit back. And so I thought at the 10-minute mark, Trayvon Jones coming up and popping Mike Wright. Mike Wright got up and he was fine. I mean, the guy's tough as nails. Credit to Mike Wright for getting right up after that. And then that's kind of when the flag fest starts, Will. I mean, that fourth quarter was, man, that's when I ended up leaving. I left early. Fourth quarter.
Shame on you.
I know, but I got to the point where it was, it was bad football. It was a flag fest. And, credit to Elon, they made it. They kept it tight. But I thought Vanderbilt played atrocious in the fourth quarter, and the whole second half. I say that because my expectation for Vanderbilt in this game was to come out and not dominate like they did Hawaii, but play 4 quarters. And it's still hard for this team to put that together against a quality opponent. They're still working for that. But yeah, credit to Elon for not giving up on defense in the second half, especially in the fourth quarter. You could tell that Vanderbilt defense was wearing down. I mean, it was death by a thousand cuts on defense, and but they got the play, they got the stops, they got the plays, they created the plays and the stops when they needed to, and so credit to Vanderbilt. But it makes me wonder what's going to happen against a better offense. For example, a Wake Forest or an Ole Miss, or even a Missouri. How well does Vanderbilt stand the test of time through four quarters against a better team? So, and then Will rolling through at the 6:42 minute mark. I did not think that was pass interference on B.J. Anderson. Um, I'm trying to think of this specific play. I know you know what I'm talking about. I'm trying to envision it.
Corner of
Anderson.
the end zone.
Yes, yes, yes. So,
Mm-hmm.
so corner of
I
the end
didn't think
zone.
that was either. I watched the replay and still didn't see what they called
Yeah,
really. I mean, he tugged on it a little bit, but that's maybe it just depends on the
yeah,
angle, and maybe we didn't have the angle the referee did, but it didn't seem like it from when I saw it live, and it didn't seem like it when I watched the replay on television either.
yeah. And Coach Lee after the game, he talked about how the BJ has made that play before without committing pass interference, and he expects better of BJ. The Mahoney one, that was a tug. That was in the play after that. That was a little tug. That was a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
obvious. But like I said, Will, I mean, there were penalties everywhere, and then you get to the 3.5 minute mark. This is when it got real for both teams. Matthew McKay is spotted short of the first down off of after a 9 yard run, but I thought he easily got it. I thought McKay had the first down at about the 3.5 minute mark. I'm not sure why there wasn't a measurement. I don't know why Coach Trisciani at Elon didn't hammer down and ask the officials for a measurement. They didn't get it, and Vanderbilt gets a huge stop on 4th and 1. And that felt like the game. That felt like Vanderbilt had okay. Vanderbilt's getting there. They're inching closer to a win. They just had enough distance to win this game. Will they just had enough. They had a good enough start to win this game, and so that's kind of my fourth quarter analysis. Clark Lee said Mike Wright's performance was inconsistent, and I talked about that a little bit earlier. I agree. It's hard to say that after 6 touchdowns, but
After
there were
setting the school record for touchdowns
yeah,
accounted for, it's nice to say that his performance was inconsistent, and everybody to kind of agree, and he still did that is pretty impressive.
yeah, and I just the fact Mike Wright's gonna do what he does. But I am with Coach Lee in that this could have been more of a bloodbath if maybe Mike Wright makes a throw or two. But it's not all on Mike Wright. This is not it is somewhat the Mike Wright show on offense. I mean, that's kind of what it is and what it's going to be. But yeah, that kind of wraps it up for me, Will. Big stops though, big stops for Vanderbilt's defense, and that's what ultimately won them the game. They anchored down and they hunkered down and got it done on defense. So I know I've got some comments from Coach Lee I want to get to, and then we will get to our three main takeaways. But that's pretty much what I got, Will. But it was the story of two halves. It really was, and it was a story of two halves. Vanderbilt the first half had control, but Elon knew how good they were, and they knew they could beat Vanderbilt offensively with the arm of Matthew McKay and his legs. His legs were huge. He had two rushing touchdowns, and McKay's a good player. So credit to him, credit to Elon. But Vanderbilt is the better team. They're the better program, and it was good to see them get a win over you know, it, that's a good FCS team. And last year they couldn't do it. Last year they couldn't do it, so that's a step in the right direction, Will. And I thought Coach Lee had some interesting comments after the game. He said, "We know how hard winning is, so we're not going to miss an opportunity to celebrate that. We're not going to we're not going to shy away from that." He also said on the defensive back issue, I want to get that rotation ready ahead of time. He said we defaulted to leaving our starters in instead of throwing some younger guys out there. He expressed his concerns with the defensive staff as well, so I'm sure that they'll be cleaning that up. But he also said in the second half, Will, they lost their technique and started playing out of character. They just you know they just kind of not they didn't get suffocated, but there wasn't 100% effort in that second half defensively. And yeah, I think a lot of that is the maybe jet lag or whatever you say from Hawaii. But at the same time, Vanderbilt's they're going to be playing teams better than Elon, and they've got to clean some things up. No doubt about it. So we do have our three main takeaways, Will. But to wrap up, I know you had some other thoughts on that second half.
Yeah, you touched on every key play. So you did a great job of that. And I mean, anything else just hits on my main takeaways, really, that I break down from the half and even the examples that I have from that fourth quarter that I'm going to bring up. I'm going to work into my takeaways. So I think probably best. Now that we've got the recap done,
Here we
I
go.
think
Let's get
we're getting the format down now. So now I know we're going to do a quarter by quarter breakdown. I'll take my notes that way. But you can see them here, Billy. I've got them down
there you go.
as key players and then my three key takeaways. So I don't have things broken down quarter by quarter.
Gotcha.
How you had. So I'm trying not to spoil these takeaways.
I like it. I like it, Will. That's smart. That's savvy. It's a savvy veteran move by Will Byrum. But all right, Will, let's start. Let's get into it. Three main takeaways. And man, I miss doing this from last year. This was the fun part of last year. All right, I'll start, Will. Number one, and this is just a takeaway from what I saw and the guys that were out, the guys that couldn't play. Number one takeaway for me after seeing this game be played, this team's got to get healthy. They've got to get healthy. I know this is you can say this about every team, but specifically this Vanderbilt team, they've got to get healthy. Quincy Skinner was out. Rocco Griffin was out. Julian Hernandez was out, a guy on the offensive line. Of course, Davion Davis is still out. Braden Babs is still out. Devin Lee is still out. And there were a lot of guys that got banged up in this game as well. Ray Davis got banged up. Anthony Orji was banged up a little bit. He was busy all night. He needed an ice bath after that one, I'm sure. Arrington Truesdale was out, a guy that looked good in camp, and we thought was gonna play a lot this year. So, Will, for me, they've got to get healthy, especially with Skinner, Rocco Griffin, and Hernandez, guys that played week one but weren't able to play in week two or whatever, week 0, week 1. The Coach Lee after the game, he said a couple guys were on the fringe of playing. We didn't want to put them in a bad spot. We didn't want to put those guys in a bad spot. So that tells me that we're probably going to see Griffin, Skinner, and Hernandez probably against Wake Forest. And that reassures me that we will probably see those guys against Wake. And, that's a good sign. So I think looking ahead, it's a good sign because, quite honestly, Clark Lee probably gave these guys just another week to get ready, get rested because they know Wake Forest is an important game. But I think they missed Rocco in this game. I mean, having him back there, I know Chase Gillespie ran hard, but Ray Davis he had to run more than he might have liked. I know he likes running the ball, but not having Rocco hurt out there. I know Pat Smith is suspended; he's not hurt, so not having him hurts, I think too. But running back depth was something we talked about before the season, and all of a sudden, it's Ray Davis and Chase Gillespie really back there, and so. I think not having Rocco back there hurt a little bit, probably not a ton. And then no Quincy Skinner. He played better than I thought he would against Hawaii. And so a couple big pieces on offense did not play. Julian Hernandez missing an O lineman always hurts. So yeah, well for me this team's got to get healthy. And this was just a realization kind of heading into Wake Forest. After watching this game, realizing man, Skinner didn't play, Griffin didn't play, Hernandez didn't play. They've got to get healthy. So that was kind of a big realization for me. This team's got to get healthy.
Yeah, you started off a little on the improvement side, a little on the more I don't want to say negative side because that wasn't really negative, but just saying some of the. I'm going to start off my first key main takeaway, just so I can get this all out of the way, is going to just be completely positive, and that is going to be that without a doubt, Billy, if we went back and listened to our preseason preview and what we wanted to see, that the offense has done what we wanted and already check. They have improved the amount that we have wanted, and I don't mean that in an exaggerated way. I tweeted that through 8 games last season, this offense had scored 106 points. They scored 105 points through 2 games. And that included games against UConn, Colorado State, and ETSU. So it's not a competition difference thing. This offense and the offensive side of the ball is that much improved from last season. I think that it's very easy, very quickly to get away from what the initial expectations were and what the initial concerns were. And I think that if you would have told us that this offense was averaging 52.5 points after 2 games, that we would have been over the moon with the offensive performance. So there has been some inconsistency, obviously, and I will get to them in these takeaways. There are some things to take away from this Elon game that I'm sure Coach Lee just a little bit and Clark Lee just a little bit is happy with. That there's some things to show on film that were really bad, and to show, hey, you're not that good. We're not that good. We may be 2-0, but we have a much better team coming in. So part of Clark Lee is probably a little bit happy. There's something to learn from, even from this loss. That while Elon was able to make Vanderbilt not cover the 18-point spread, was able to make the final score look worse and look closer than I think it really felt a majority of the game. And it took a Vanderbilt goal line stand to not make it a one-score game coming down to an onside kick at the end. But it really felt like Vanderbilt was in control of that game for 95% of it till the very, very end. When the ball slipped through Will Sheppard's fingers on that onside kick. So the initial takeaway is the offense is improved. And you have to run through a little bit of that game. So I do want to read off just a couple stats in this 2022 offense. And I know this is going to go down because the competition is going to get tougher. Defenses they're going to face are going to have this new offense on film. They're going to be able to adjust to Mike Wright. I get all that. Let me be a little happy before I get to that in my takeaways 2 and 3. Okay. This offense in 2021 was averaging, and let me say this, okay, just so you can hear it. They're averaging 15.8 points per game in 2021. Did you hear that, Billy?
15.
Let me repeat that. 15.8. So keep in mind that is what we saw. They scored 21 total touchdowns in 2021. We saw 21 total offensive touchdowns in 2021. We've already seen 15 in 2022 through 2 games. This team in 2021 was converting, I believe, 31% of their third downs. This year so far, they're converting 43%. So the rest of that, I don't want to get too into stats because it's so early, but those 3 stats right there. And I've already said the points, 105 through 2 games. They had 106 through 8 games last season, 52.5 points per game so far versus 15.8. So let's just take a step back and say 2-0 for the first time since 2018, and an offense that only had 21 touchdowns all of last season already has scored 15 touchdowns this season. So Vanderbilt fans, just step back and don't take it for granted for 1 second, because I know I had to do that after the game on Saturday night.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of fans that caught themselves doing that. They caught themselves slipping a little bit, and those stats are huge. I mean, looking at those stats, it's crazy. It is mind-boggling looking at that and looking at those numbers. And my second takeaway is the offense. Well, so it's literally everything you just said. And yeah, I'm with you. So my second takeaway, the offense, I have it here. The offense is more explosive than I ever thought they would be. And I thought they would be improved. And I know they've played Hawaii and Elon, but you've played opponents and you've done things that, like I tweeted during the game, this Vanderbilt offense is doing things. They're doing things they just did not do at all last year. I mean, at all. 15 points per game, 21 touchdowns, and they're already at 15 touchdowns. It's crazy, and averaging 52 points a game. So 105 points through the first 2 games. Another key stat here, we knew they would be a heavy rushing team, but 583 rushing yards through the first 2 games. That's impressive. And, the offense goes as Mike Wright goes. This is, in theory, I think at the surface, the Mike Wright show on offense. I mean, he is the quarterback, and they've gone as he's gone. But, Will, I look at 4 guys on this offense: Mike Wright, Ray Davis, Jade McGowan, and Will Sheppard. When those 4 guys are clicking on offense, they're tough to stop. I mean, this is a tough defense to prepare for and defend when they're clicking. And they were clicking at times against Elon for the majority of that. I mean, second half mostly, or first half mostly. Second half, of course, we saw them stagnate. But when those 4 guys are on, there's not a defense in the country that, there's some SEC defenses that aren't scared, but I think there's some mid-level defenses that aren't excited to prepare for this offense. Overall play design also looks better. I mean, Coach Lynch, I think, has improved, as Mike Wright has, as Will Sheppard has, as this team and the players have developed. That I've also seen development from the coaches and the coaching staff, and that was a big point last year, Will. I mean, Coach Lynch and the schemes, and of course you had Ken Steele back there running an offense that was built for Mike Wright. I mean, majority of the time last year. But they've got their guy at quarterback, and Will, there's a few schemes I really like. The triple option pitch, I like that. But also having McGowan in the backfield, getting it out to him, letting him run. I mean, there's plays out there that I know there's defenses that don't like to prepare for it. So my second takeaway is literally the offense. I know Elon stats said they put up more offense than Vanderbilt, but in the first half, Vanderbilt dominated offensively, and and I'll get to some of those stats later. But yeah, second takeaway for me, Will, is the offense, and it's just they're more explosive than I ever thought they would be.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a way to do this because my second and third keys are not exactly they're not exactly keys. They're like broad ways of thinking about what we just saw in the second half of that Elon game and two different ways of looking at them. And I don't know which one I really lean towards right now. So I think I'll just go offense and defense, and I'll start out negative and give the more negative glass half empty type spin, and then I'll also give the positive glass half full type spin because that's really the only way, because I don't know where I fall. And I think it's going to be crazy how much we learn about this team against Wake Forest in this upcoming game. And so much of that is going to depend, especially on what we learn about this defense if Hartman is able to play, because right now I think that's still up in the air. But we'll start on the defensive side of the ball because I'll do that for key takeaway number two and what Elon exposed. The negative side is we knew that this team had depth issues, and we knew that the defensive line would have some issues creating consistent pressure with larger, more experienced offensive lines that they would be facing. And we knew that the secondary would struggle holding up if they did send blitzes against those more experienced offensive lines and man-to-man coverage. And we saw that. Elon exposed it multiple times, one-on-one coverage, guys in position, and they just got beat. You mentioned that number 43, good grief, completely number 2 leading tackler. He had 8 tackles.
Derrick Wright.
Derrick Wright. On one of those plays, they just ran a simple type like wheel kind of underneath, then not a seam, but a go up the sideline. And he just they were in man-to-man coverage, and he was lined up against the slot receiver, and he just got straight up beat. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was no safety help up top, and it was just one step and a perfect throw. And there were times that was a concern for us going into this year, where was this inexperienced secondary. They hadn't really proven what they would be able to do against better competition, and these Elon receivers exposed them kind of like ETSU did last year. Mm-hmm. Now the other side of that is what you mentioned with the Clark Lee comments, is there's the hangover from Hawaii. They didn't do a great job rotating how they played defense against this Elon team, put them in a lot of one-on-one situations. They were still in position. But maybe that fatigue just got in the way, and they weren't able to play the ball as well and use technique as well, just because they were tired and they didn't have the depth. So like you said, getting back at your point one, or key takeaway one, is getting healthy and making sure you have the full rotation and having that down, and the flexibility that Mahoney provides with that experience at corner and safety. I think is definitely something you need to take advantage of, especially as the competition increases. But yeah, the glass half full side is they didn't want to show a ton of exotic pressures and ways that they were going to disguise their defense, because they probably didn't have to show a lot of that against Hawaii and were able to save it. They only had to show a limited amount against Elon. That game was over after that first drive from Vanderbilt made it 35-10 to start out the second half, realistically, without a complete collapse, which they almost did. It was literally completely statistically over. And I think the coaching staff recognized that they wanted to prove a point with the Hawaii game to continue to put the pressure on and make that score, even though they did really call off the dogs at the end about as much as possible. And they didn't need to continue to show elaborate blitz schemes and ways to disguise their coverage. And going into that Wake Forest game, the less you have on film, the better. Because you're already at the disadvantage that Wake Forest is coming off a game where they played VMI, won 44-10, and only have one game on tape with that current roster, I believe. And especially if they have Hartman coming back, you have 0 games on tape. And Vanderbilt has 2 with their new offense and newly designed defense. So how much of that in the second half from the defense was just trying to allow guys to rest and limit the rotation, and then rotational mistakes that can be learned from, hangover fatigue from Hawaii, and how much of that was real issues that were exposed by Elon, who came out with some pretty good second half adjustments
Yeah.
and exposed that Vanderbilt was just leaving these corners without a lot of experience on islands against these receivers and exposing them. So this Wake Forest team definitely has some talent, and we're going to see that maybe you need to allow a little bit more help up top for these guys, especially if you have, guys that are playing that, what is it, the star and anchor positions, having to play man-to-man coverage on tight ends and slot receivers. That's going to be pretty tough. And now you have that on film, that's something that you are willing to do, is have these mismatches in man-to-man to allow pressure because you have limited defensive line talent that's providing pressure just straight up. So continuing to adjust that, I guess. But Wake Forest has a lot more to work with. Elon exposed a lot of things in that second half that Clarkley and staff are going to have to adjust.
Yep, and he said it after the game, Will. He said, we're not good enough right now to make the mistakes we made and beat formidable teams. He didn't say it that specific way, but he said it in a sense that he basically said, if we play like this, we're not beating Wake Forest, and we're not even going to be in it in the second half. And that Wake Forest will make
Derricky
Vanderbilt.
Wright's not going to. Derricky Wright is just not going to be able to be in man-to-man situations on a receiver. That just can't happen. And that's how the defense was designed at times. And the reason I kept avoiding saying his name and saying 43 is I have BJ Diakite written down as a guy that impressed me throughout the game, making tackles. Yeah, I know. He's 93. Diakite, Derricky. It's brutal in my brain. It's just constantly just different numbers and stats that's so similar with similar numbers. So damn you, Vanderbilt, for making them 93 and 43. Two ugly numbers, too, for two pretty good players.
Yeah, 43. Derricky deserves a little bit better. But no, Will, Clarkley said, Wake Forest will make them pay for those things that they did in the second half, and they've got to look at those. So, for me, number 3, Will, is very similar to your second takeaway. For me, I said defensive depth remains an issue. The second half defense, I'm gonna say it. It was atrocious. I do think a lot of it was, yes, fatigue. They had injuries, and this team, they don't have the horses yet on defense to go out and beat a Wake Forest type of offense. Now, maybe they do. Maybe they show it and they beat Wake Forest next week. But what we saw in the second half against Elon, that cannot happen. That cannot happen against Wake. The corners are in the second half. What I saw in the corners, they weren't fit, to keep up with big time receivers like Elon has. I mean, Byrum he's a good receiver. I guarantee you, Wake Forest has about 3 or 4 of those guys that look just like Byrum, and they're going to throw it to them. They are going to get it out to those guys. And Wake Forest, Coach Clawson right now is looking at that film saying he's licking his chops right now, what he saw from this Vanderbilt DBs in the second half. Apparently Clark wasn't happy with rotations in the secondary. I get that. Maybe that's fixable. Maybe this is improved, but it's tough to see. It's tough to see right now. Elon threw for 343 yards, and the majority of that was in the second half. Elon really, I think, I thought you said it best, Will. Elon was shocked a little bit in that first half, and I'm not saying they overlooked Vanderbilt. It's Elon. It's an FCS team, but I think there was a little bit of Elon saying we can go in and beat this team if we play like we can. And I think Vanderbilt shocked them. Vanderbilt's better. They're obviously a better team. But Elon, if some things go right, they could have won that game. I mean, they very much so could have won that game. And so yeah, that's my third, Will. Defensive depth, and I know they're banged up. I know they've got to get Davion Davis back. They've got to get Devin Lee back and Braden Babst. They've got to get healthy on that D line. But the DBs, Tyson Russell and BJ Anderson, those are good players. I mean, those are good players. They've made plays, but they just there's nobody behind them. They're out there. That's really who they've got to play with. I mean, you've got Jadis Richard that you can throw in there. You've got Jeffrey Hugo, but those guys are young. Those guys are freshmen. And so the experienced guys they've got, it's BJ, it's Tyson. I know Jeremy Lucian. Jeremy Lucian's the guy I didn't see a ton of on
Mm-hmm.
Saturday against Elon. I think that's one guy Coach Lee was hinting at when he said that. He said, "Hey, we've got guys out there we can throw in." So I think it can get better. I think they can improve in that regard against Wake Forest, but it's gonna need to be substantial improvement. Will on the defensive side, especially with the defensive backs, and you've got to have safety help. Like you said, you cannot isolate DeRicky out there on an island, and you can't really do that. Like a lot of the corners, Wake Forest, it's almost as simple as, hey, we're gonna throw our best receiver out on an island with this guy. We're gonna throw it to him. I mean, I think that's what Wake Forest is thinking right now. They've got better schemes than that, of course. But I mean, I think that's a little bit of it for Wake. I mean, let's isolate and let's get it to our playmakers. So, yeah, for me, Will, I'm with you. I was second half from the DBs. What we saw, they were in position. It's not like they were just getting burnt and getting toasted, but there's some improvement there. So defensive depth for me, Will, remains an issue. And like I said, that doesn't happen overnight. Once they get these freshmen developed and worked out, this will improve. But that's one of my main negatives of this game, defensive depth, and they wore down, and that can't happen against Wake Forest. It just can't.
Yeah, and I'm torn, and I'm glad you brought up the defense again because there were a couple things I realized that I forgot to say right before I get to my takeaway three. But yeah, McKay threw 19 to 32, 333 yards, 2 touchdowns,
He
no
was
picks. I
good.
mean, those stats are stellar.
Yeah,
And he didn't even play the whole game, and obviously
Boffman. He
Boffman,
got
yeah,
hurt.
he got injured early in the game, and I think for their offensive production, that may not have been the worst thing.
Yep.
Obviously, it looked like that was a pretty bad, some type of ankle injury there for him. But
Yep.
yeah, McKay played outstanding. And you mentioned it, Wake Forest has receivers that are that athletic and more athletic, and that's all that they have. And so the other side, the very glass half full side, is this was a testing game for Clark Lee and the
Right.
defense. That first game, 63 to 10, you didn't see anything like
This
guys
was
matched up
this
in
was week
man
one.
coverage. This was the week one. This was the
Yeah.
game that, okay, we got our win that was super impressive on the scoreboard, and we proved something with that. And now we're going to try some things out. Now we're going to see what we have in these tough situations. And it reminded me a lot of the ETSU game. Corners in position, just getting catches made on them, on their
Yeah.
heads. And
Yeah.
there were a few
Yeah.
times, including one that Russell had against him that I think probably wasn't a catch that you mentioned in the
Yeah,
game
that one
recap
was
that Clark
weird.
Lee.
That was
I think we'd view the end of the game and Russell's performance a little different if that would have been challenged and overturned, because that would have been another one that was a good play. And then against Hawaii, you had Maxwell Worship break up one of those late. But yeah,
right.
what were you going to say there, Billy?
I
Sorry.
was I was just gonna say that was weird because couldn't Clark have challenged that? I looked at that and said, you know, why? Where's the challenge? I mean, they've got the red flag they can throw out, and so I thought Elon should have done it on the spot, on McKay's spot late in the game too. So, I'm not blaming that on Clark by any means, but there was a part of me that said, hey, if you think your guy broke that up, where's the challenge? And so at first I thought I didn't see the fumble part of it. I thought Russell totally had it, but he did lose it. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, it should have been incomplete. That's what it should have been.
Mm-hmm.
Elon got back up to the line, and they went and, they kept going. So credit to them. But I was wondering where the challenge might have been there. That was a weird play.
Yeah, you had that, and most of the talk has been about the secondary because that's
Yeah.
the most obvious issue, and so that's what I mentioned, and that's what we both talked about. But the other thing that I think got exposed was the sideline to sideline quickness of the linebackers, and not Orgy. That's not who I'm talking about, but just overall, that speed on the defense is just one notch too slow, and I think it's a notch or two above what it was last year. I think that it's getting there and it's continuing to get better. And Barr is an incredible middle linebacker. And he would have been an All-American if he was playing 30 years ago. Okay. He truly would. He would have been top 2 or 3 round draft pick. Think Chris Spielman, John
Talk
Ofendahl.
about grit, man.
Yeah, those are guys. That would have been him. But there's one play in particular, and it was McKay's quarterback scramble where he snuck the ball in the goal line. I think it was in the fourth quarter, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, at around the 10, or I could be wrong there. I don't remember the exact
Kane
timestamp on it.
Was in there too.
Yeah, and Ethan Barr specifically was just one step one step away, and his speed has improved from where it was previously. This is something that we brought up from the moment we started doing this podcast, and we talked about is he's everything you want, hitting, tackling, but it's just one step too slow,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to be two steps too slow against Wake Forest. So are Clarkley and the staff going to be able to scheme with that? Because you have to have him playing, especially with the team that has defensive line depth and size struggles, because you need a more hard hitting middle linebacker.
Yeah.
Well, you don't get that while simultaneously getting a guy that's sideline to sideline blazing fast. That's Zach Cunningham, and that guy comes around once every 20 or 30 years, especially at Vanderbilt. So Ethan Barr has to play just because he fills the interior gap so well against the run
And he's
game
always
of
in
the
the right
opponent.
spot.
And he's only going to be needed more and more as the offensive lines get bigger and bigger and the running schemes get more complex. You're only going to need Ethan Barr in there more. Now the scheme adjusting around that and having other guys make up for his lack of, and I hate saying that, but it's just the truth, lack of sideline to sideline speed is
Mm-hmm.
going to be a challenge for the staff as they go on the rest of the season. And I know just saying it's a challenge doesn't offer any solutions because I don't have any. And I watched that game two or three times, and a lot of the issues were just seams created by losing contain. Cecil played really well again, but multiple times it's boom or bust with the defensive line. It feels like a lot of times, very rarely do they just stagnate the offensive line. It feels like they either lose contain or create massive gaps, or they completely stuff the play. And maybe that's just youth that's just not having consistent depth. The guys aren't able to get the rest they need, bring in fresh bodies, situational bodies, whatever it is. But there are just too many times against Elon in this game that the offensive line for Elon is just able to create a beautiful pocket for McKay. And that's seen. You don't have a guy go 19 of 32 for 333, 2 touchdowns, no picks.
Yeah.
If the defensive line is creating a disruptive pocket majority of those snaps. So that's something against Wake Forest. They've got to get pressure. Because
Yeah.
if they leave these corners in one-on-one situations or even in zone situations, even with Wake Forest backup quarterback, he's just going to pick them apart.
Yeah.
So I don't know if blitz schemes are needed or if it's just straight up defensive line just has to win their one-on-one battles. But something's got to happen where they're able to get more pressure on the quarterback, even though that statistic has improved from last season on a defense that really struggled to produce quarterback pressure.
Well, you mentioned statistics. Where I'm going to get to this final stats rundown as we wrap it up, but there you have it. Three main takeaways after the Elon loss. Will, let's go through the stats here. I know I know we've mentioned some of these, but a stat that I saw right after the game, I think it was posted late that night. 10 true freshmen have combined for 361 snaps in the first two games. That's pretty impressive. I mean, for they dominated Elon, and we want to be able to say they meant to say they dominated Hawaii. We want to say they dominated Elon. They did, for for the first half, and they had control of that game. But that's a pretty good recruiting pitch. I mean, to throw that out and 10 true freshmen combined for 361 snaps, pretty impressive. Also, Will Mike Wright, 11 carries. It's just fun looking at his final stats after each game. 11 carries, 84 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 passing touchdowns. He was 18 of 29 for 245 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. Not too bad. That'll win you some games. Now you need the defense to play behind him, but man, he's doing what he can. And 6 total touchdowns. First Vanderbilt quarterback to have 6 total touchdowns in a single game ever. And I mean that is saying something, because you've had guys like Jay Cutler, Kyle Shermer. I mean, I know the quarterback play hasn't been great, but it hasn't been a slouch either, especially in the past 10, 15 years. So there's the stat there on Mike Wright. Ray Davis had a good game. Will 20 carries, 95 yards. He was the highest graded SEC running back per Pro Football Focus. So I saw that tweet earlier today. And how about Jaden McGowan? 4 catches, 118 yards, and a touchdown. SEC Freshman of the Week. We saw it last week. He was Pro Football Focus's SEC Freshman of the Week, but he's the official SEC Freshman of the Week this week, Will, and he deserves it. I mean, he deserves it. He had the catch and run out of the backfield. He had the deep 75-yard free play, of course, too. Will Shepherd also, 6 catches, 58 yards, 2 touchdowns. Both of those were in the first half. Anthony Orji, 13 tackles. He was everywhere. Led the team. Ricky Wright, also 8 tackles. Matt Hayball, 7 punts, 49-yard average. Not too bad. Not too bad at all. And Will Shepard, he's the first Vandy receiver to record multiple touchdown passes in back-to-back games since Earl Bennett back in 2005. Your guy Earl Bennett there. So pretty impressive stat line for Vanderbilt, Will. And but Elon, their offense, I mean, they outplayed Vanderbilt in the second half. They ended up with 495 total yards. They had 343 passing yards. Vanderbilt did have no turnovers, so it was a pretty clean game from Vanderbilt. But a key stat, Will, I look at, Elon had 34 minutes time of possession. Vanderbilt had 25, and a lot of that time of possession for Elon was in the second half, where Vanderbilt was kind of getting beat by 1,000 cuts. Elon led in 3 important offensive categories. Will, they led in total yards, they led in passing yards, and time of possession, but Vanderbilt was still able to get the win. That shows you how much of a fast start they had in that first half. They had just enough distance, and that fast start, man. Well, without that, I don't know that they win this game. I mean, it's weird. It's crazy saying that, but I think you're. Yeah.
I was muted. Yeah, I was about to say the thing is there, Billy. I don't. This is where I say I'm looking at this from this perspective, and I could be so wrong. Clark Lee could hear these words, Barton Simmons, whoever else wants to listen and could hear this and think I'm totally wrong and totally stupid. And you would never hear the staff say this because it would sound stupid. But I don't think the second half happens if the first half doesn't happen. Right. They clearly throttled down the complexity of what they were calling, saw that just the number of possessions, it was going to take multiple onside kicks and Elon recovering and very quickly scoring for Elon to come back in that game after they went up 35-10 and then 42-24. It just did. That is just how the game had to play out. And Elon almost did it. They almost scored and were only one onside kick recovery again, another one, their second of the game, and another quick score, their third of that quarter, I believe, away from pulling off the comeback. But I think that the Vanderbilt coaching staff basically recognized that they can't just continue to show everything before this Wake Forest game. I think that they have a realistic opportunity to come in and beat a top 25 team, or at least stay very, very competitive and send a message that they are very, very much improved from last season. So I know that a lot of people are going to take it away as, well, thank goodness that happened, or Vanderbilt fell apart. But obviously Vanderbilt played poorly. They took their foot off the gas. They didn't intend to give up that many plays and not execute their offense well. But they clearly, if the game was really in question, there were some things that they could have done, like that they were having success with, like they were running Mike Wright less. And in situations when he otherwise would have run, they weren't going to run him, because if he gets injured, man, because right now this is something else. And AJ, I know it's weird. I hate that Vanderbilt has played 2 games because and there have been some teams that have played 2 games versus 1 game. But right now, Mike Wright is tied for the lead in the nation in rushing touchdowns. He is tied for the second longest rush in the nation, and he is second in the country in rushing yards. That is our quarterback. That is Vanderbilt's quarterback this season. So having somebody putting up those numbers, I just take a step back. This isn't something that just is, wow, this is a good start the first couple games against some not so good competition, so discount it. Vanderbilt has started off plenty of seasons against not so good competition and against bad competition. They haven't had anybody ever that's done what Mike Wright has done. Literally, not an exaggeration. Literally, he's set the record for total touchdowns responsible for. And I haven't heard that many people talk about it. This is my big rant. It's actually positively spun this time, Billy. So that's actually unique.
How about
that? The underappreciation, just because it's been Hawaii and an FCS opponent, of what Mike Wright has done early: 6 touchdowns, no interceptions, a 157.3 passer rating, perfect. What he has done early is everything that we listed out that we could have possibly hoped to see the first 2 games from Mike Wright is what we have seen. He's going to miss some throws every now and then. The best quarterbacks in the country miss throws. Trevor Lawrence, the #1 consensus overall draft pick, Heisman Trophy winner from Clemson. He missed throws every once in a while in college. And Mike Wright is certainly not at that level of passer, and that is not the expectation. So I think that it's very easy to shift how you're viewing and judging things, which was my key takeaway. One is everything that we were going into the beginning of the season was Vanderbilt being a 9-point favorite over Hawaii. Can the offense score 24 points or more against Hawaii? That was a big question. Well, now they've come out and put up 63 and 42. And now the question is, man, they're not stringing together full games of consistent offense. And do they have deeper. And do they have the ability to our teams go and there is another side that teams are going to be able to adjust to what they've seen, and it's not going to be as easy for Mike Wright to run the ball, and they're going to adjust by having the safeties come up more, and you're going to see more press single man coverage without safety help up top. But what I've seen from Mike Wright, and I think what he's shown so far, is he's going to make teams pay. And every time it seems like they're testing him, that he's making them pay a lot more than he's not. So Wake Forest will be a better test, and it's going to come down to McGowan and Shepard, and can they win those one-on-one battles? Yep. Can Schoenwald and Bresnahan chip and come off the safety valves there? But another thing is Rocco back next week, because that's going to be huge, man. Ramon Davis had 20 carries, but it would be huge to have Rocco after what we saw against Hawaii.
Clark Lee didn't specifically mention his name, but he did say, the guys that were out should be back against Wake Forest. So, and Will, I think it's smart. If you're Clark Lee and that staff, you don't play him against Elon. Big whoop, you don't play him against Elon. But you better be damn sure they're on the field against Wake Forest, because this is the biggest game. I know we say this a lot.
2018 Kansas State.
But, yeah, this is the biggest game Vanderbilt has had since Kansas State. I mean, I don't know that it's going to have as much hype, but it's going to be pretty close. I mean, SEC Nation coming to town, 11 a.m. kick. We'll talk about it all, of course, later this week. But Wake is an early 8-point favorite over Vanderbilt. 8 points, and that'll probably go up a little bit. I don't think it'll go up
it's
a whole
already
lot,
gone up. It's already opened up at 6.5.
Yep, it already went up.
It's already hitting the big threshold, which is one of the hardest ones to hit, which is the 7-point. The 6.5 to 7.5 line jump is one of the biggest ones, some of the hardest to get past. It's already done that. I knew it would. I think it'll get to the 9.5, 10 before it's all said and done.
Yeah, that's what I think
too.
The
over-under's high as well, 62.
I think I was just going to say that. I think this could be a shootout. And I know we like saying that about certain games, but, I mean, you look at both teams. Both teams aren't particularly strong defensively, especially in terms of athletes and depth. So I think this could be, who can score the most. I mean, obviously that's what football comes down to. But I really do think.
No way.
That's in depth.
I don't know if I agree
with
that one, man. It's a little too out there for me.
Little too out of the clouds there for me. But
I do want to give a shout out to Gillespie on the block on the Mike Wright run. I don't think that's got enough credit either.
Great block.
Yeah, he cleared out that linebacker, safety, whoever it was, and sprung that run. I think he only had 2 carries for net 0 yards coming in relief of Ramon Davis. But he should get credit for the 44 yards that Mike Wright got on that run that he made cleared out with his block. So
yeah, but Will, 8-point dog versus Wake. You got it there opened at 6.5. I think the most it gets up to is 10. I mean, I don't see it going up more than that.
It's all going to depend on if Hartman is announced that he's going to play. It's going to be it'll be 13.5.
I don't see that happening. I don't know. I mean, I could be totally wrong, but
message boards seem for Wake Forest fans to be cautiously optimistic. I'd be shocked. I mean, if you bring him back for an away game against Vanderbilt, I'd be pretty surprised.
But I
haven't even seen what's going on. I don't know if there's. I mean, they haven't really said exactly what's going on.
I haven't seen a single update from Wake Forest side, so we'll have to see. Will Sam Hartman play or not? Hopefully he can get out there eventually and get healthy. But selfishly, Vanderbilt does not want to see him.
One more game, Sam. One more game. I think you need one more game of rest, and then I will be every thought will be with 100% ready to rock. Want to see you out on the field. Because the worst part is I don't like when Vandy plays Wake Forest, and I don't think they've played Rutgers, but Wake Forest and Duke, I feel like this odd kind of connection to in their football programs. It's like I feel the pain, they feel the pain, they
Yeah,
understand. So usually Wake Forest, especially with the color similarities, when they're not playing Vanderbilt, that's who I
yeah,
pull for, and especially with Hartman being as likable of a guy as he is from what I've seen on that
yeah.
QB1 documentary and everything. So this is going to be tough. This is like my number 2 college football team here in FBS that Vandy's playing against. Now there's a pretty big gap, I'll say, between number 1 Vanderbilt and number 2 FBS Wake Forest there, but yeah, it's
We
going to be
got
two
Will's
black and gold teams in the stadium. It
we
always
got
looks better for the crowd, though. I'll say
oh
that. It's
yeah.
like the Missouri game. Always
Oh
looks
yeah.
better on TV.
Wake fans are gonna try to wear a lot of gold to try to separate it somehow.
Perfect.
Just try to but that won't be
Vandy's
a
going to
problem.
it. The genius move is a gold out. Is like a Vanderbilt, like a black and gold out. Like I don't know, announce something that works into the way. But yeah, I
Oh
know Vanderbilt is going to have so many shots ready to go. I know they're smart. This is one thing about the athletic department that I trust now is they recognize this is the game you take all the overhead shots at.
this is the
It's
game.
not the Georgia game. It's not with the red. It's not the Tennessee game with the orange. This is the game you take all the shots because then you slap one little filter over. Everybody's in black and gold. Look at it. It's
Yep.
great. So
Yep.
this is the one. And I know that you're going to see some drones and a lot of cameras out there. And that's another thing I noticed. You're talking about the game day experience. I just saw where I had written down is I noticed guys walking around taking pictures of kind of from different angles in the stands and different things. So it's not just that they're making better social media posts, it's everything. It's not as simple as saying we're going to make better social media content, which is kind of how I feel they've approached things in the past, which is why we were so negative on Candice Lee. It's
Yeah.
actually seeing
Yeah.
anything executed has been pretty great to see. It's like I have this expectation of walking into disappointment and seeing things slightly improved. I'm like, wow,
Well,
this is a
look at that.
10% improvement over last season. Wow, this is amazing.
Well, the turf looked phenomenal though. I mean,
Looks so much better.
that was my first look at it in person, and I mean, I like I said, I did not realize how bad former turf was. I mean,
Dude,
my
I
God,
still think the Star V looks better in the middle of the field. I
I,
think that the V is growing on me on the uniforms and on some other stuff. I think the Star V looks better flat on a field or on a court, but on like a helmet, the
yeah,
other V is kind of growing on me. But that
yeah,
that's taking some getting used to.
yeah. There's a lot of new stuff. The new V FirstBank Stadium. There's a lot. It's just there's a lot of new things going on at Vanderbilt. So Vanderbilt and Wake Forest
And
though
after
will
nothing new for my entire life, there's a lot of
yeah,
new things. So
and
it's a little weird.
and we've
Everything
got
was the exact same for the first 20 years that I had season tickets.
yeah,
And then everything has changed the last 3 to 4 years. So shout out to the current administration. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep
brand
trucking.
brand new
I'm on the
Vandy,
train.
brand new Vandy. Oh man! All right. Well, next week I'm ready for this one. We got Vandy and Wake Forest, 11 a.m. Central Time.
This
Got
is
it.
this is our
Got to get
first
up
real
early.
roster breakdown. We
I
haven't
know. I
we haven't
know.
really been able to dig into a roster. This is the first time
Without,
we'll actually get to have some data from a previous game and have a Power Five opponent. So I'm pumped. Really.
I'm excited. I'm excited. Vandy and Wake Forest. That'll be Saturday, 11 a.m. SEC Network, SEC Nation is coming. Marty and McGee, all those guys. Tim Tebow will be on campus. So we'll have to see how that goes. But for now, you've been listening to episode 176 of the Door Report, powered by Alaco Fine Wood Floors.